Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to another episode of Substances Explained. Today we're covering Alprazolam and the abuse of it, otherwise known as Xanax. This is a pretty common prescription prescribed for a variety of reasons, but one of the big known ones is its use for anxiety. It does have recreational potential though, and does draw a certain kind of person into abusing it for various reasons. It can be one of the most dangerous substances to get dependent on, not only for your mental well-being, but there carries a serious risk of death in the withdrawal. We're going to dive into these things today, and also the basics you should know about Xanax, such as the history of it, the pharmacology, the chemistry, the culture of it, doses, toxicity, and pretty much all the standards to know when it comes to a substance. That's what we do for a Substances Explained video if you're new to the series. But something we're adding on today is subjective experience. We're going to bring on my good friend Ashton, which I don't think I mentioned Ashton before, but he's going to be in a lot of future stories. Then also we have the homie Psych Rubus coming on for a bit to mention some of his past experience, as it also does line up pretty strongly here. The biggest thing here though I want to highlight for this video is the blackout part. How you can really just lose not only your time, but also yourself completely with Xanax abuse, with possible further repercussions to follow. You can do some stuff that totally isn't you, stuff you would never do in a million years, all because you just aren't thinking and the bars make you act stupid. But we're going to talk about this plenty. First we'll get more of the technical and objective information on Alprazolam. Not too heavily this time around, as I do want to highlight the subjective experiences a bit more. Now one more quick thing before we start, I want to note that this series is tied as a sibling series to the reports I read. Essentially, each episode here is inspired by a past report, and we might use it as a reference in this video. For this video, the sibling report is The Lowest of My Lows, Xanax 28 mg by Evan. I recommend you check out that report first if you haven't, as it will paint the tone for this video. But besides that, we got a lot to cover and talk about. Expect some more episodes to come, and subscribe and like if you enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. Alright, so let's start off with essentially what Alprazolam is and how it came to be. Going by the chemical name of 8-chloro 1-methyl 6-phenyl 4H 1,2,4 triazolo 4,3-A 1,4-benzodiazepine, Alprazolam technically belongs to a derivative class of benzodiazepines known as triazolobenzodiazepines. How it differs from other benzos is that these derivatives contain a triazole ring. You can spot this trait out by the zolam suffix used. But to understand why this derivative class came to be, we have to take a brief look at benzodiazepines themselves and how they came to be. So the first ever benzo invented, that's documented at least, is one called chlorodiazepoxide by Leo Sternbach in the mid-1950s. At first they were disappointed with the results, until 2 years later when doing some cleaning, Leo had some crystalline compound left over from it, where they picked up things from there, and it quickly found use as a sedative/tranquilizer by 1960. Just 3 years later, diazepam would enter the market as well, and these two would be the main benzos for quite a while. Many others would be patented and approved throughout the 1960s though. The patent for Alprazolam was filed in 1969 by Upjohn Company in Michigan, which was later acquired by Pfizer right before the turn of the century. I'm sure there were monetary incentives at this time for companies to invest in benzodiazepine research, because due to the safety and effectiveness of chlorodiazepoxide and diazepam, older hypnotics and sedatives like barbiturates would slowly lose their prevalence. But Alprazolam was invented by Jackson B. Hester Jr., where he worked as a medicinal chemist for the company. The idea was to make additions to the benzodiazepine class with substances with better overall biological effects than the ones in place. This is a common practice in chemistry, and his research resulted in the class triazolobenzodiazepines, with the two main substances being triazolam, which is now used mainly for insomnia, and the substance we're talking about today, Alprazolam, with the intent to use it more for anxiety. Compared to other benzos, this derivative class doesn't undergo the usual oxidative metabolism, which allows it to have a short half-life, faster absorption, and more potency. In 1976, the patent was granted, then approved by the FDA in 1981 October. where only a month later in November 1981 did they make it a Schedule IV substance. Later in the year 1990, it became the first benzo approved to be used for panic disorder, which is a big reason it's become so widespread and known. The thing is with Xanax, Upjohn Company had intentions to actually use it as an antidepressant at one point. It had built a market for itself during the 80s with Xanax and its use as an anxiolytic. But Upjohn Company conducted their own research heavily with it and put millions of dollars into studies to show it could be used as an antidepressant. The appeal with Xanax being used compared to other antidepressants is that it's a lot less toxic. Essentially though, this wasn't concluded as directly effective compared with antidepressants. But they had done so much research concerning panic itself that it developed into being approved for panic disorder, a disorder which was made official in the early 80s. And essentially, it developed the disorder into what we know today. The FDA didn't even make them compare it to placebos or other anti-anxiety medications because the research was so heavy. But I'll just say now in terms of depression, the research they did and research that has followed does indicate there is a potential antidepressive effect. It's likely to be more acute though, and probably not as effective compared with other antidepressants, especially in the long term and depending on the type of depression. But Xanax as an antidepressant deserves its own video and focus because there's just so much to cover here. But only 3 years later, after its approval for panic disorder, the generic version would become available and other companies would enter the market. Which there are thousands of different brands of Alprazolam in the world, just to give you an idea of how widespread it's become. It's one of the main substances used today when it comes to anxiety and panic disorders, but it can also see usage helping with insomnia, depression, alcohol withdrawal, seizures, or potentially nausea-inducing conditions. But that's basically how Alprazolam came to be concerning it prescription-wise and chemically. I want to dive into the pharmacology a bit here and explain how it can help out with these various conditions. Then we'll get into how it can be abused and used as a recreational substance, explain the culture a bit, the rampant usage of it, and then things like withdrawals, overdoses, and other dangers about it. But moving on with the pharmacology, which I'm going to try and break down simply. So benzos and most depressants are involved with the GABA system. Specifically, alprazolam is a positive allosteric modulator of GABA type A. What this means is that alprazolam will bind to GABA type A and modulate the response by increasing its binding affinity and activation efficiency. Specifically, GABA A's chloride channel opens more frequently and for longer, which allows for an increase in GABA. And if you don't know, GABA is considered the most abundant receptor set when it comes to inhibition. In other words, it's the set of receptors most involved with sedation and calming effects. It directly leads to a decrease in neuronal activities. And this activity here is expected where the bulk of the effects will arise from. In general, Xanax is considered a CNS depressant. So for the effects, expect things like anti-anxiety, muscle relaxation, anti-convulsion, sedation, motor loss control, cognitive suppression, which this one includes a handful of things like memory, functionality, awareness, completely blacking out, and more, appetite enhancement, dizziness, and euphoria. These are the main things. Some other effects and side effects can be possible depending on things like dose, combination, and physiology. But there's some other pharmacological activity going on that does contribute to these effects, possibly more we don't fully understand. There is research suggesting that extracellular dopamine concentrations are increased, which most likely is playing a role in recreational feelings, but also the general activity of the substance, like the reduced anxiety and relaxation. Then there could also be binding with voltage-dependent sodium channels, which is theorized to contribute to anticonvulsant effects, though research is needed to see if alprazolam actually affects these channels. But in general, the activity going on is considered to be complex, and it gets even more complex with long-term usage, especially when trying to understand why seizures and other strong discomforting states can occur. But let's bring out the pharmacokinetics briefly now, as there is some critical information I want to mention. Like I said before, Xanax and triazolobenzodiazepines in general have a faster absorption rate and distribution compared with other benzos, reaching peak concentrations in about 1 to 2 hours, which is very ideal for those who need something quick. Alprazolam is metabolized by the cytochrome P450-3A4 into 2 different metabolites, both of which are thought to not contribute to the effects. This cytochrome is of importance though, as other substances may be metabolized by it, resulting in an increase or decrease of concentrations. Just something to watch out for. There's also findings that suggest Asian populations may naturally metabolize higher concentrations compared with Caucasians, about 15 to 25%. Then for a group like cigarette smokers, findings show that concentrations can be reduced by half. But now let's take a look at the addictive and withdrawal effects and what happens when one becomes dependent, then how the use and abuse of it has developed in our society and culture. So clearly, there can be some appealing aspects when it comes to Xanax and recreational use. The relief of everything can align immensely with this. I think it is for a certain kind of person, but the usage of it has been very widespread. And that's because it's one of the most widely prescribed substances out there. Alprazolam is considered to be both physically and psychologically addictive, and dependence can be strong. Typically it will take some time, with somewhat stronger doses than prescribed, about a few weeks before actual physical dependence will form, but psychologically it can vary. The feelings of euphoria and relaxation can be tempting, even for those taking prescribed doses. But it's when you start getting into those higher doses over a long period is when dependency will form and the chance of withdrawal states to happen if use is cut off. It's highly recommended a tapering plan be set up because of how dangerous it can be. You can expect effects like anxiety, insomnia, headache, nausea, appetite loss, heightened senses, dizziness, possible delirium, possibly seizures that can kill you, and possibly more. Even though the FDA has put Xanax as Schedule 4, that is considered to have little to no abuse potential. When you step out of the guidelines for therapeutic doses, I would say it has extreme abuse potential. And when you consider how society has incorporated it recreationally, how it can get pushed on the streets, I think that naturally raises the abuse potential regardless of what the effects are. And a lot of the time, it may be used in combination with another hard substance. The most common probably being alcohol, but other downers, opiates and whatnot, can be commonly used, all of which will exemplify the dangers that can happen, like overdosing and suffering from respiratory depression. It's unlikely for an overdose to be fatal alone with Xanax. You'd have to take thousands of bars theoretically, as the LD50 has been found in rats to be somewhere around 331 to 2,171 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, which good luck just reaching 1 kilogram. Prescribed doses range as low as 0.25 milligrams and maxing out at 4 milligrams throughout the day for anxiety. While for panic disorder, the doses are higher, so it's effective. Usually somewhere around 6 milligrams, but doses up to 10 milligrams have been reported. Which this is a strong concern when it comes to dependency, and many can be susceptible to abusing it. But considering this recreationally, for the theme of this video, we have to bring up the risk of doing some real dumb stuff and ruining your life. I know too many in my life that have blacked out off Xans and just did some really stupid stuff that they never do sober. Examples include like robbing stores, robbing people, driving all reckless and getting into crashes, getting in stupid fights, getting into police chases. I even had a friend who accidentally did a home invasion and had to serve some time for it. Which some of these guys would just wake up in jail not knowing what the fuck happened, just for the cops to tell you. It's terrible, man. It's a big risk with abusing Xanax. When you take so many, you just black out and then do some shit like that. Which, that's partially what makes me not like it too much myself, at least in stronger doses. I have yet to tell some Xanax stories of my own, but I remember I would wake up the next day and just be pissed. Reason being is, I completely missed the night out and had to have all my friends tell me what had happened with me. They told me I was somewhat acting like I was conscious, but I don't remember a single thing. But I want to bring up my homie Nick briefly. Nick can't be with us here today, but he'd want me to bring up his past experience with his Xanax abuse. Now, Nick started to abuse Xanax when he was only like 12 or 13 years old. A big reason was just the people he was around. He would be around plugs and whatnot, as he just naturally made friends with them, and they would hook him up with hundreds at a time so he can go and sell it at school, which it got huge during high school. But just being around the substance, he naturally wanted to try it himself, and he actually fell in love with the feeling. He would tell me part of that desire was just blacking out and being numb, to escape from all the shitty things going on in life. Because Nick had a ton of trouble growing up, when it came to his dad and his older brother at times. His dad was a junkie on and off from what he told me, mainly on dope, and his mom would always drink a lot and be a mess because of it. And he could really feel the brunt of the situation. It wasn't appealing or great by any means, but being with his friends at the time and doing Xanax, it was. He also just naturally liked doing drugs, and he told me selling Xanax was one of his favorite activities to do. Essentially, he got to the point where he was hooking up the whole school, and almost got caught up bad for it. Now, I knew some barheads back in high school myself. I didn't know Nick at this time, but I remember I had a friend of mine, Jose, who would always come to school all barred out. Not too much to black out, but enough to where he just didn't give a fuck about anything, and it made a better vibe for him, though he did black out a few times. He told me the anxiety reduction was part of the appeal. But sometimes at the lunch table, this guy would just be out of it, and you best believe the last thing a barhead is going to care about is the schoolwork. But anyways, I remember back when I was in school, when Xanax kind of became more of a thing. We would have some reports at our school. Nick was hooking up everybody, and eventually there were some hospitalizations for it. When I met him later, he told me about this and that one of the girls he sold Xanax to. I guess this girl had never done anything like that, but Nick was just trying to sell the rest of the bars he had on him at the time, which was just a small handful, like 5 or so. Which he didn't really care too much, but he told this girl to be careful with it and just pop one. But of course, what does she do? She popped all of them. Nick was telling her she was an idiot and all this, and he had class with her. And shortly enough, the bars start to kick in, and she just completely passes out and was a mess in class. Which, when Nick saw this happening, he was scared as fuck he would get caught, because there were people that knew he was the main plug for Xannies. So when that shit started happening, he just got up and left. Like, fuck this shit, I'm not gonna get busted. He may have had more Xanax in his locker from what he had told me, so I think he went to grab that and just went home. But just stupid, man. I remember people talking about how Xanax was plaguing the school and all this shit, and hearing how some people had to go to the hospital, so my mind was just blown when this dude told me he was behind it all. Never got caught, luckily. And most of the time he was just barred out himself and really didn't give a fuck. The thing is with Nick, he wouldn't live and think like someone who's trying to get their money up, but he would behave like an addict. With how young he was and how much he really didn't care, it was natural for him. And I don't like looking back and seeing bro as an addict, but drug addiction is something he struggled with heavy for a lot of his life. He told me he would always just sell enough to be able to pay the plug back, and keep the rest for himself. Sometimes he would tax the hell out of them just so he could have a little more to himself. He would tell me he would always end up with like 30 plus Xans just to himself, and that wouldn't include the ones he would be taking while selling. I know for how cheap he got them and how much profit he was able to turn, it was some really good money, but that was just something he didn't care about, even though money is something that probably could have helped out in various ways. And sometimes he would fuck up too. Sometimes he would take more than he should have, and wouldn't always have the full amount for the plug. So that kind of behavior, and thinking you can get away with that, is when things get super rocky. But as you can imagine, with him taking this much this way, he easily became dependent on Xans. For him ideally, he would be taking them every day, which would only work for so long. His first seizure, he had no idea Xanax could do that in the withdrawal, which it happened after like a month or two of him using when he was waiting to re-up, which would be the most risky periods for him. At first for him, it was a lot easier to spread out the usage, but with time, your tolerance will go up, and you're going to need more and more just to get the same effect. And that's going to be a problem when you only have so many pills to work with, and you have to sell so many as well. But he told me when he seized out, it would almost always be at his home, and just about every time he would, his mom would be around. Which obviously, it's going to be traumatic for any parent to see this. And the first time it happened is when she basically found out Nick was addicted to Xanax. And to see it again, and again, and again, it's terrible. He told me if she wasn't around, he wasn't sure if he'd live through them. But the thing is, when you get to that state, when someone's seizing, you really can't do too much but let the process happen. Get emergency help immediately, and do your best to make them comfortable. But sometimes he would be alone, and then other times he would have a warrant or legal trouble and made sure no one called an ambulance. Basically, he told me he built up to taking like 20 plus pills a day, and it was no longer to be high or barred out really at that point. It was just so he can feel normal and okay with things. Because the withdrawal stayed as hell, and there was a real chance he could have died. He even told me one time he saved out like 6 or 7 at the end before he had to re-up, and he hoped that 6 or 7 would be enough to be alright. But even at that stage, he built up such a tolerance that he still seized out regardless. It was one hellish hole he dug himself into, and one that impacted his life heavily. And then there's counterfeit Xanax, which came like a year or 2 later. At first it was mostly pure stuff, but then reports of fentanyl overdoses and whatnot started popping up. But Nick has done a ton of things in his life. Among those things included dope and fentanyl. So when Nick started to get some fake Xanax, he was still popping them, which super deadly combination. But I know Nick had built such a tolerance at that point that to take him out, it had to be something huge. He knew they were fake, but he would still take them because he just didn't care and just wanted to feel good. To make a long story short though, it would take some trips to rehab for him to get somewhat back to baseline. Which even after the fact, he would always at least pop 1 or 2 here and there. And I didn't even mention him trying to rob people, getting into these fights, failing school, and not doing the things he should have been, and basically just fucking around as he grew up on this stuff. He probably hardwired his brain with how many Xans he was doing. And especially when you're at the risk of death because you know you may seize out, you'll be willing to do some pretty scummy stuff to make sure that doesn't happen. But I feel like we gave a good presentation for what Xanax is, how it came to be, how it works, and how its usage developed into what it is now. And of course the abuse of it. Nick I feel like is a good example for how rough things can get with Xans. But now we're going to talk with Ashton and then Psychrubus about their experience to hit that home even further. Alright, so welcome to the interview portion for this video. First we got my good homie Ashton here, where he's going to talk about his abuse with Xanax.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. It's nice to be here.
Yep, I appreciate you coming on. Ashton's been a good homie of mine for like 5 years or something, since the end of high school, and he's had a lot of experience with Xanax. Not only him, but also the people close to him as well. So you ready to start with these questions, bro?
Yes, sir.
Alright, so the first question. How did you first start using Xanax, and what made you continue using it?
Well, the first time I took Xanax was my sophomore year of high school, so I was 15, and it was in the lunchroom, and this dude that I was hanging out with had a green half bar, and he put it in my little apple juice cup, and so that was the first time I took Xanax, and I was, tripping all over the place, and the teachers were, wondering what was in my water bottle. I was passing out in classes and stuff like that. So that was the first time I took any drug, actually. And then I kind of realized that I could get this like escapism from it. And then I just used it as an escape mechanism from my problems forever.
So
Well,
can you elaborate a little bit on that, the escapism part? Would you completely black out, or would you just like take a few and just kind of be mentally numb?
Well, it kind of depended, it like definitely certain days I would take, like 4 bars in the day or something like that. But, a lot of this I don't even remember. So I'm kind of just.
No, right. You gotta go off, what you can.
So
'Cause that's the thing with Xanax too, it'll fuck up your memory.
Yeah, exactly. So most of my memory on this topic is kind of gone. But I take like 4 bars, 4 or 5 bars in a day. But when I started, it wasn't like that. It was like a half bar would get me fucked up.
No, right.
But then as you just build the tolerance to it, you see more and more and more. And then the people you surround yourself with start doing it more and more and more. And then everyone starts doing it more and more and more.
Can you tell me how Xanax use affected your relationships with your friends and family?
Well, I mean, I would steal a lot of, I wasn't stealing Xanax, but I was stealing other pills from, like my uncle and stuff like that, and my grandma, but that, didn't really affect our relationship too much,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely other people taking Xanax in my family have affected our, like, that's affected our relationships. Like, you know, my dad, my
Right.
mom, uh, fucking, you know, even my grandpa
What's
takes Xanax.
what's some of the things they would do?
Well, it just makes them real confident to the point where we're getting into fights over like the stupidest shit,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes them really aggressive, and it's just, I don't know. And then with my dad, for instance, because my grandpa's not abusing it like my dad is, but like, you know, my dad's always nodded out, and you know, he'll wake up from being nodded out and be really pissed off. Like, for instance, like he'll nod out with a cigarette in his mouth, and you wake him up because the cigarette's about to fall,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he'll freak out and be like, "I was gonna fucking smoke that," or whatever. You know, I don't know, dude. It's not a fun time being around people that are super fucked up on Xanax. So
Did they, your dad or anyone, like, get into any, like, big trouble, like, financial, legal troubles from Xanax use?
oh well, yeah. I mean, he's on his 4th DUI right now, and that's from not from drinking; it's from pills.
Yeah.
So, uh, you know, there's been many stupid fucking occurrences with my dad.
Like any fights, like physical fights and stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean, we get into physical fights all the time, and you know, but since he's so fucked up on the pills all the time, he doesn't ever remember what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So his version of the story is like completely different from what the reality of the situation. So he runs around and he tells all these lies as if they're the truth because he doesn't know. I don't know if it's because he's trying to manipulate people or if he really just doesn't know what happened.
Could be a mix of both.
That's what Xanax Eludia, I guess.
So are you prescribed it still, bro? Or you're
I
prescribed
was
Klonopin?
never prescribed it, actually.
Oh, never any benzo?
No.
Okay, okay.
They gave me, for my anxiety, I was taking this like antidepressant that supposedly also helped with anxiety, but eventually I stopped taking the antidepressant because I wanted to just stop taking all pills.
No, right.
Because I don't like the ones that the, you know, big pharma's given to you either way.
All right, be natural. As much as yourself as you can. When did you, when you were taking like 4 pills or something, how did you stop using that? Like, how did that like slow down?
Well, I met this girl towards the end of my senior year of high school, and she lived on the south side of Chicago, and you know, I'd go up there because I eventually got kicked out of my house, and I went up there to live with her, and she wouldn't like there was a what's it called, like a I don't remember what the word is, but like she said I need to get clean basically, or
Mm-hmm.
I can't stay there. Uh, so I had to get clean to stay with her and stay up there at the time. So I just eventually said fuck it and stopped taking them, and I was able to kick it.
Any withdrawals or you were chilling?
Yeah,
Oh, you did?
yeah, but not like super crazy. Like I wasn't having seizures or anything.
No, right.
But eventually, you know, I did. Later on in life, I started having the seizure effect. Like eventually, it gave me seizures. I started to have them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been having them ever since. So, I mean, you know this. I'm just
Yeah, yeah, just adding it in. So, is there any like triggers or situations that would make you want to use Xanax again?
not really considering I picked up alcohol along the way, and that's been my main thing ever since.
So, if you had the choice of alcohol or Xanax, you're picking alcohol?
Yeah, yeah. Just because it's easier to get and can carry it around legally.
True,
Like
true.
I, you know,
Did your usage at all affect your ability to get a job or hold a job?
I mean, I was working when I got kicked out. I was working at this fast food place, and then I had to quit because I got kicked out. So, I mean, I guess technically, yeah, but I I mean, I don't know. I feel like if I was taking pills now, I'd be able to do it in a way that I could still work somewhere. But I don't know. Who knows? Because like, look at my dad. Because he can't work
No,
for
right.
shit.
You can just get into a bad cycle, and one thing leads to another, and one day you're popping too many.
But the problem with that is you also need the money to get the pills. So, with
Mm-hmm.
my dad, he's got ways, or like he's given the money by people and the government. But, I wouldn't be able to get that same kind of help. So I would need to get a job to fund my addiction. That'd be the only way. Or sit on a corner with a sign.
I know with Nick, he used to be selling them, and he would just take off his stash.
Well, yeah, that too. But I wouldn't want to
Yeah,
get
right.
that. That's like a whole nother thing that
That's a whole nother level up.
more stress added on to my life that I don't need right now.
No, exactly. So, last question here. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with Xanax addiction?
Well, I mean, I guess that there's always a way out of it, but I can't really, I guess that way out is different for everybody, so I can't really speak on that, but
Yeah, just keep trying.
it is possible to stop. Just takes a lot of fucking dedication.
No, a lot of effort, a lot of willpower, a
And I
lot of
mean, even
focus.
after you stop, it seems like the problems never stop. It seems like it never goes away. It seems like it's one of those things.
Yeah,
Like,
especially if you use the heavy.
I mean, still to this day, we're talking about it right now. So, yeah, I don't know. It's funny because like my grandpa prescribed it, but he doesn't really take it, so he just gives his scripts to my dad to fund his addiction. So that's why he don't have a job. But I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then there's all the like, middle America, like suburban moms and stuff that are just taking it because they're stressed out.
No, right.
So, I don't know.
It's just, yeah, if you're the right person, that's what I just think. Like, if you're the right person, you're susceptible to this drug and the effects. Like, it's just a matter of time. Like, before, dependency will set in and you get triggers and cravings and whatnot.
Yeah, and they also try to scare you into thinking you need it.
The
Like I'm sure a lot of anxiety diagnoses, I don't fucking know, are false just to get that script.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because then there's a million other things that come with being addicted to Xanax. Not just having to pay for the script, but they make money off a lot of things.
It's just, yeah, getting them locked in essentially on something. But I think we'll end that there for today, this first interview. Appreciate having you on, bro.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, man.
Alright, welcome to the second interview portion for this video. We got Psych Rubus here. Welcome, man. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Fantastic, man. As you know, we're here to talk about the Xans, your past history with it, the abuse with it. So, hey, you ready?
Absolutely.
Alright, we're going to start with this question. I asked my other friend Ashton this. How did you start using Xanax, and what made you continue using it?
I guess when you ask me how did I start using it, you mean like how did I get it, or
Yeah, I guess you can think about like what's the first instance you ever took it?
well, I was actually at a friend's house when I first took it, and I have been diagnosed with anxiety and shit. So, I'd always get like real tense and I'd have these panic attacks. And my friend gave me a pill one night and it was just happened to be a Xanax. And I just felt like completely relieved from my anxiety. And so that's what led me to continue taking it, was the fact that I didn't have to live through such an anxious state of mind.
So, from your friend then, did you continue to pick up from them after that fact?
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of became a drug that I could not go a day without really fast, because when you have untreated anxiety and you take something like Xanax, it tends to give you a bit of euphoria because you're experiencing moments where you're not anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I wanted to do was sort of chase that feeling really, really fast.
Would you say, like, for that feeling, would you say it's more of a you can still function type of thing, or would it be more numbing and like almost to where you would black out?
Yeah, I would say the feeling is just complete bliss and complete unawareness. And I know for some people, they'll say, "Oh, Xanax is really shitty. I don't know why anyone would take this drug. All it does is make me fall asleep." And I think there is a fine line between dosing. When it comes to being addicted to it, you need a far larger dose to achieve a high. So
Mm-hmm.
I think to an extent, like maybe 2 or 3 months out from your addiction, it becomes a sort of I think the other thing that you said, kind of numbing. That
Yeah.
numbing effect happens, and you start to get used to taking it over and over again, and you just start to feel numb to pretty much everything.
To where that's pretty much like your new normal.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Would you say your Xanax use affected your relationships with your friends or family?
Absolutely, yeah. I had a couple roommates at the time, and I was taking a lot of Xanax at the time in college, and I had a couple roommates that I would take way too much Xanax, and when you have a tolerance like that, you don't just not black out, you still black out. So I
Mm-hmm.
would black out, and I would, it's a shitty thing that I did, but I would black out and like take some of my roommates' 5-ins or other drugs that my roommate had. And so it like sort of created a fray between the trust that people had in me, which kind of like really made me, I guess, upset in a sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really too into it to really consider anyone else's feelings but mine.
So you bring up stealing from people and whatnot. So I want to
Yeah,
ask, did you get into any legal or financial problems because of your usage of it?
yeah, absolutely. This is a really PSA to be careful with Xanax use, is because, yeah, I did get in trouble for stealing in a couple times. And, it went on my record, and I was 18 at the time. And yeah, it really kind of fucks up your life. You're always kind of nervous about, am I going to get this job or not?
Yeah.
Things like that. But yeah, overall, I would say it's just a shitty addiction that leads down a hole of, and for some reason, I don't know why, but Xanax makes you steal. So that's like
Yeah.
a well-known phenomenon, I think. And yeah, it can really make you do things that you're not consciously aware of, and it can really turn you into a person that you're not. I mean, like, it can really turn you into a nasty, mean person.
Yes, sir. Most definitely. So did you ever try to stop using Xanax on your own? Or did you try and seek professional help?
No, I never sought professional help for my Xanax abuse. I was actually in a hospital for unrelated reasons, and they actually took my benzos away from me. And so that was
Uh,
the real wake up call for me, right? Because I was taking, you know, 6 to 8 milligrams of Xanax per day, if not 10 milligrams, and then to go from that to the hospital, where they didn't even give me a taper. They just like gave me an Ativan for a few days, and that was
man.
it. So yeah, that was the first real consequence I had in my life, where I realized how addictive specifically Xanax and benzos can be to my life. And then that's, of course, when the seizure started.
You want to get into the withdrawals a little bit and the dependence?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say dependence can develop, I'd say in a few weeks. Depends on how much you take, of course. But I really think it takes a couple weeks for dependence to show up with benzos. And I think the withdrawal effects are really important to talk about because they're fucking god awful. Some would even say worse than dope, heroin. It's just there's so much electricity in the brain, and that's kind of what Xanax controls in a way. So when you go off the Xanax and you have a predisposition to sort of seizures, it can really lead to a lot of seizures, and it can lead to a lot of shaking and permanent disorders that are like not fun. I mean permanent disorders in terms of like it can cause physical injury to you. Like you can black out and have a seizure and fall and hit your head on the ground. That type of shit. It really poses a danger to you if you take a lot of it. But the withdrawals are best described as hell. Just a bunch of shaking. For me, it was shaking, vomiting, and seizures. I would have a lot of those seizures. I remember that. Of course, I never went to the hospital at the time, but seizures were always kind of I guess if I didn't have Xanax, they were kind of a surefire thing.
All right, and that really like paints just some of the lengths some people will be willing to go to just to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to discuss that. I was having these seizures and I didn't even care. Like, you know what I mean? I was still doing Xanax, and I knew I was gonna have these seizures, but like I just got to a point where the drugs were more important.
All right. So when you stopped, how did your life change from there? Like after you got hospitalized and whatnot, they took that away. How did your life change from there?
Well, I had some medical problems from the withdrawals from Xanax, where I physically had some brain damage occur.
Okay.
So yeah, that wasn't good at first. I had a brain bleed and shit like that. And I seemed to get through the withdrawal pretty nicely. I mean, I was at home and I was doing great.
Mm-hmm.
And, not having the Xanax for probably, since now, I mean, I haven't taken it in a long, long time. Since now, it kind of cleared my memory whenever I wasn't on it. It allowed me to memorize things more, which was great at the time because I was finishing college. So like quitting Xanax really allowed me to spend more money, and it allowed me to like kind of do what I want with my life because I got this chain that's free, it's like cut loose from the addiction.
Oh, hell yeah, man. But did you have any like triggers or any situations that would make you want to use it again?
Yeah, absolutely. When things like that are your drug of choice, then outside things are definitely going to influence you. And yeah, I can say for me, I've just had to stay away from situations where people would take that. I've just kind of grown up and got to a point where, I've experienced that, right? And like I also, know it's like there's no point to go back to that, and
Right.
It's shitty seeing people, really excited about all these benzos. I mean, they're useful or whatever, but the addiction's horrible, and the addiction you're starting is horrible. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with Xanax addiction?
Definitely, if you want to reduce like physical harm, like because I was a dumbass and had a seizure and hit my head. But if you want to reduce physical harm, I would suggest like going to your doctor and getting a taper schedule where you can kind of slowly go down in your dosage. And I would also work on, surrounding yourself with people that don't use the drug, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Things
Just not
like
being
that.
around it, not having that connection. It's a big thing.
Yeah, not having that connection, and just another piece of advice is like you don't want benzo withdrawal. It's like it's hell. It should be enough to scare you, but I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling my story.
Yep, that's all we can do, really.
Absolutely.
So, anything else you want to add, man?
No, I mean, I think I'm straight.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on to tell us about all this.
Yeah, I'll see you later, bro.
All right, peace. All right, we're gonna end things there for today. I appreciate you if you watched all the way through and are here at this point in this video. I got more episodes of these coming up. Let me know if you did like this episode and what you guys want to see next. Tons of variety coming, and this year we're just gonna be killing it. So it's been someone that's no one, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.